Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is my great pleasure to welcome you to our book discussion today. My name is Alif Dagru. I am a psychotherapist in the Pittsburgh area and a member of the City of Bridges Foundation. The increasingly widespread witch hunt, systematic and widespread hate speech, ongoing persecution and massacre of the Gülen Movement members have made conditions in Turkey ripe for a deliberate, planned, and systematic genocide, as Bülent Keneş, a veteran Turkish journalist in exile, wrote in his newly released book. What he says attempts to sound the alarm for the international community about developments in Turkey that are inching closer to a full-fledged genocide against the Gulen Movement, a faith-based group targeted by the government. Keneş, who fled persecution in Turkey and has been living in Stockholm for the last 4 years, is the author of a new publication that this program is focused on. A Genocide in the Making, Erdogan Regime's Crackdown on the Gulen Movement. Dr. Bülent Keneş is an exiled Turkish journalist and an academician who has been the author of 7 books on Iran, Islam, Turkish politics, and human rights. Keneş, who has over 25 years of experience in journalism, used to be the founding editor-in-chief of the prestigious English daily Today's Zaman. Keneş was also among the founders of Stockholm Center for Freedom. He is now a member of a team establishing the European Center for Populism Studies, based in Brussels. At this time, I would like to give the floor, or in our case the screen, to our moderator, Kelly Armour, folklorist in residence at Erie Arts and Culture.
Welcome everyone. Mr. Keneş will present for about a half an hour, and then we'll have a time for questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much for invitations, having me and giving me this opportunity to share my views and findings that I detailed in my recently released book about what have been happening in Turkey for the last few years through targeting and persecuting the members and alleged members of Gülen Movement. But before starting my presentation, I would like to talk about a short glossary to make some concepts clearer. When I say nationalist or ultra-nationalist, I mean those who are conventional ethnic, race-based nationalists. However, neo-nationalists are a different segment, and they are a mix of hardcore Kemalists, staunch laicists, and sovereignists. Moreover, Islamofascism means a fascism based on exploitation of both religious and nationalistic emotions to maintain an authoritarian, semi-totalitarian, despotic regime. The Eurasianism is also an ideology which espouses an anti-Western approach in foreign policy and ultranationalist sentiment in domestic politics. The Eurasianists think that Turkey should leave NATO and its bid for European Union membership. The content that Turkey's interests lie outside the Western world, and Turkey should join the Russia and China-led camp. Dear friends, we know the fact that the cruelty of man to his fellow man is not new. It is as old as the history of mankind. Mass killings, ethnic cleansings, massacres, and genocide continue to cause irrecoverable injuries to the collective conscience. Although there were some intellectual efforts to prevent massacres and genocides after the First World War, we know that it was only in 1990s that the international law against the crime of genocide produced some legal results and penalties. However, what is more important than the prosecution and punishment of the crime of genocide is its prevention by early recognition of the genocidal process. Experts working on genocide emphasized that some conceivable mechanisms could be established on the subject. As one of the prominent experts, Gregory Stanton describes the process that leads to genocide as predictable, and since it is predictable, it is also preventable. In my book, The 10 Stages of Genocide, which was formulated by Stanton, has been integrated with political scientist Hasan Kakar's studies and applied to widespread and systematic persecutions aimed at members of the, or alleged members of the Gülen movement in Turkey. The clear picture that emerged as a result of this work reveals that all the crimes and acts contained in the academic descriptions and legal definitions of the crime of genocide have already been carried out against members of the Gülen movement by the Erdogan regime. As of today, slide 2, please. As of today, millions of people have been victimized by the campaign of persecution conducted against the Gülen movement, which the Erdogan regime accelerated after the controversial military coup attempt of July 15, 2016. More than 160,000 people have been dismissed from their civil service jobs and deprived of their and their families' subsistence. Tens of thousands of people in the private sector have suffered a similar fate. Prevented from starting any kind of new business or working elsewhere, they were sentenced to poverty and transformed into the civil death. Just because of their daily activities, which are non-criminal acts according to law and a part of the very natural routine of life, more than 500,000 people of all ages have been taken into custody, and many more have been subjected to investigation. Moreover, at least 80,000 people have been imprisoned. Dear friends, widespread and systematic torture has re-emerged in Turkey. Thousands of people were severely tortured either in police custody or in prison. At least 2,000 people died under suspicious circumstances or committed suicide because of psychological and physical pressure or torture. At least 32 sympathizers of the Gülen movement were kidnapped in broad daylight through mafia-like tactics, and the whereabouts of some of them are still unknown. Slide 30, please. During this process, at least 200 media outlets have also been closed. Over 173 journalists and media workers are still in Turkish jails. Thousands of journalists have been left unemployed, and hundreds of them, like me, have been forced into exile. Slide 5. On the other hand, thousands of educational establishments, including 15 private universities, were closed and their assets were confiscated. Some of these assets were transferred to Erdogan's cronies. In the process, more than 23,000 academics have been directly affected, with the remaining universities transformed into mentally and spiritually hollow shells. Slide 6, please. Also, the assets of over 1,000 major companies were usurped. All the assets of 4,887 institutions and foundations, as well as thousands of individual persons, again including me, were confiscated. You can find more detailed statistics in the book. The increasingly widespread witch hunt, systematic and widespread hate speech, ongoing persecution and massacre of Gülen movement members have made conditions Turkey ripe for a deliberate, planned, and systematic genocide. The Erdogan regime, along with millions of his volunteers or its volunteers, has made significant progress in the direction of uprooting the Gülen movement and has made its actual implementation only a matter of time. Now, All the indicators in Turkey show that the risk of a systematic genocide increases with every passing day, and that this risk has become a clear and present danger. Therefore, this alarming situation requires the urgent mobilization of international community, all institutions and powers that bear responsibility for the prevention of such a process before greater consequences are realized. In this regard, my book may be kindly accepted as a timely or early warning. As is known, despite some serious limitations, the most comprehensive and functional definition and description of genocide is found in Article 2 of UN Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, or shortly, UN Genocide Convention. According to this convention, the realization of just one of the 5 acts clearly described in the article is legally sufficient for the act to be defined as crime of genocide. Genocide is described as systematic acts committed with intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group, is in the process of full implementation in Turkey against the Gülen Movement, which constitutes a sui generis religious social group with its distinguishing characteristics. Dear friends, late Afghan-American academic Hasan Kakar argued that there are some preconditions for the possibility of implementation of genocide in a country, as one can assume that a leader, a government, or a group would like to annihilate a group which was otherized, demonized, and hostilized by themselves. However, if they have not the required preconditions, they could not realize their intentions for extermination. In the book, it was discussed in detail to what extent the historical, sociological, cultural, political, institutional, and conjunctural conditions in Turkey meet these preconditions as defined by Kakar. In this context, the Armenian genocide and Syriac genocide in 1915, Dersim genocide in 1938, poll-tax in 1942, Istanbul pogrom in 1955, Maraş and Çorum massacres in 1970s, Sivas massacre in 1992, and ongoing atrocities against Kurdish people prove that there is a strong national culture in Turkey that doesn't value human life. Along with his own dangerous radical Islamist ideology, since 2014, Erdogan has allied with ultranationalist and Eurogenist neo-nationalist ideologies. Thus, he has established a sui generis Islamofascist regime based on these 3 pillars and succeeded in creating an agitated society nourished by racial, sociological, and religious superiority discourse and ideology. The extremist statements of these 3 lines of thought do find a place for themselves in Erdogan's rhetoric, which sees people of a different race, civilization, religious understanding, and even different ideologies and lifestyles as enemies who are inferior and need to be destroyed. Radical Islamism, ultranationalism, and Eurogenist neo-nationalism, which constitute the poisonous pillars of Erdogan's Islamofascist regime that constantly glorify death and killing, are known for radicalizing their socio-cultural hinterland with a sharper discourse. As a combination of these 3 ideologies, the current Islamofascist regime in Turkey sees members of the Gulen Movement as one of their main targets needing to be destroyed. The fact that the more powerful majority group, viewing potential victims of genocide as less human, less than human or inhuman is interpreted as a significant sign of a process leading to a possible genocide. This is also the area in which Erdogan's Islamofascist regime is most effective. As was detailed in the book, the Erdogan regime has not hesitated to use hate speech targeting the Gülen Movement members to depict them as inhuman, thousands of times. According to our findings, as of May 2017, the number of expressions comprising abuse hate speech against the Gülen Movement voiced by Erdogan alone exceeds 240. Thanks to Erdogan and his regime's systematic and widespread dehumanizing hate speech, members of Gülen Movement have been objects of hatred and, in the end, not perceived as human beings by the society. Even the extreme discourse such as malignant tumors, we will sterilize them, blood-sucking leeches, cancer cells, sneaky viruses, leeches, dirty water mixed with milk, vampires, and such that Erdogan and his media use repeatedly about Gülen Movement members as are real alarm bells that require the international community to be vigilant against a coming genocide. On the other hand, just as during the rule of Union and Progress Party in the Ottoman era, under which the Armenian genocide took place, and Hitler's Germany, where the Holocaust was perpetrated, Erdogan has succeeded in becoming uncontrollable by concentrating all power in his hands and has fulfilled another requirement for genocide infrastructure by establishing a centralized bureaucratic autocracy in Turkey. Erdogan, who has rendered the system of checks and balances totally non-functional, has abolished the constitutional democracy and exercised arbitrary authority not delegated by law. Using this power without any limitations, he has succeeded in converting the state apparatus into an illegal maverick, the judiciary into a sledgehammer to crush his opponents, and the police force in total, and military forces to a great extent into his partisan militia. Among the conditions of the process leading to genocide mentioned by Kakar, Erdogan has also created armed militia elements consisting of malicious domestic and foreign individuals and criminals. Erdogan, who has developed an ominous relationship with jihadists and the radical Islamist terror groups in the Middle East, has integrated extensions of radical Islamist terror organizations such as Hezbollah, Ibdasi, Al-Qaeda, and ISIL into his regime. Additionally, by creating or collaborating with mafia structures, as in the case of Sedat Peker and Alaaddin Çakıcı, by creating militia forces as happened with Sadat and the Ottoman Hearts, and by arming his party members, Erdogan has fulfilled another prerequisite of a possible genocide. The acts listed in paragraph 5 of Article 2 of the UN Genocide Convention are aimed at harming the group targeted for genocide physically and or psychologically. When studied carefully, it can be seen that the Erdogan regime's preparation for annihilating the Gülen movement seem to fit very well with the definition of genocide in Article 2 of the Convention. However, it is worth noting again that not all of the acts in this definition are necessary to define the crime committed as genocide. From the wording of Article 2, in quote, genocide means any of the following acts listed in the article and showed in our slide right now, committed with intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group. Stop, end quote. The killings of members of the group in the genocide definition coincides with the ninth stage of Stanton's stages of exterminations in the genocide process. All stages before this stage are only preparations for the extermination stage in terms of process of genocide. It is obvious that 8 out of these 10 stages have been carried out in the process of genocide directed against the Gülen movement in Turkey. While the acts corresponding to each stage of the Gülen movement's annihilation continue, according to the findings of this research, it is just a matter of time to systematize the ninth stage, which has already begun with more than 200 suspicious deaths in police detention or in prisons. The timing of the implementation of a full-fledged genocide, for which the practical and socio-psychological infrastructure has already been prepared, is left to the convenience of the Erdogan regime, which has repeatedly declared its intention on the issue. Moreover, the predominant part of the persecution carried out by Erdogan regime against members of the Gülen movement corresponds to the act of, in quote, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group, end quote, in Article 2 of the Convention. Members of the Gülen movement have been subjected all the acts that are considered criminal acts under this article, including torture, rape, death threats, and sexual assaults, solely because of their affiliation with the targeted group. As can easily be seen, the acts in this category that fall within the scope of the genocide offense are generally qualified as torture and ill treatment. One of the important elements of genocide scholar Raphael Lemkin's definition of genocide is also the destruction of individual security, freedom, health, honor, and even life of the members of the group that is targeted for genocide. In this respect, the Erdogan regime's threats of torture, maltreatment, sexual assault, rape, wounding, and killing, which targets tens of thousands of people who have been taken into custody and deprived of their freedom by arrest, fall under the scope of crime of genocide. Because the members of the Gülen movement have been labeled, stigmatized, and subjected to treatments such as detention, arrest, seizure of property, torture, ill treatment, and many other similar persecutions, not because they are guilty of any crime, but due to their ties to the movement. Slide 9, please. It can be seen that members of the Gülen movement have been completely exposed to deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. Moreover, all actions cited in Lemkin's definition of genocide, such as, in quote, a coordinated plan of different actions aiming at the destruction of essential foundation of the life of national groups with the aim of annihilating the groups themselves. The objective of such plan would be disintegration of the political and social institutions of culture, language, national feelings, religion, and the economic existence of national groups, and the destruction of the personal security, liberty, health, dignity, and even the lives of the individuals belonging to such groups, end quote, have targeted members of the Gülen movement in Turkey. As has been stated in the book, deliberate and systematic crimes committed by the Erdogan dictatorship, such as mass detentions and arrests, the confiscation of the properties of thousands of companies and individuals, media organizations and institutions, mass dismissals of people from public service, condemning them to a civil death, correspond to the acts that constitute the offense of genocide according to Lemkin's genocide definition. On the other hand, although the Erdogan dictatorship has not been acting deliberately in planning to systematically prevent births among members of the Gülen movements, some threats exceed the heinous practice of imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group. For instance, the idea of the murder of infants is sometimes expressed by pro-Erdogan journalist and his political cronies. As a matter of fact, about 17,000 women have been imprisoned solely for their affiliation with the Gülen movement, and most of them are married. Their husbands' arbitrary and long imprisonments disrupts conditions for new births. However, for the time being, except for the arbitrary long-term imprisonment of one or both spouses, there are no deliberate, planned, or systematic practice of Erdogan dictatorship against couples affiliated with the Gülen movement in the form of a biological genocide, such as the segregation of men and women, sterilization, or forced birth control. In addition, one of the acts that are treated as genocide in the convention, even in the case of being executed in isolation, is forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. Children who are transferred to another group are torn from their social ties and alienated from their identity. Although the Islamofascist Erdogan regime has not systematically practiced this type of activity, many children have been left behind due to the arbitrary arrest of both of their parents. Furthermore, one of the most frequent threats to Gülen movement members by pro-Erdogan groups is taking children from their parents and giving them to orphanages controlled by the regime. Actually, according to some unconfirmed claims, there are already over 500 children who have Gülen movement affiliated parents in orphanages. On the other hand, this crime of genocide is carried out in a different form by interfering with the children's upbringing, education, and socialization environments, aiming to produce a result similar to ripping children from their social ties and alienating them from their identity, traditions, and moral values of the group. The Erdogan regime closed more than 1,060 private schools and 848 private student dormitories, cancelled the professional license of more than 22,000 teachers who used to work movement-affiliated private schools, thus rendering them unable to teach in a deliberate and planned manner. Also, more than 140,000 students have been torn from their schools, where they used to be educated according to a set of universal humanitarian values, and they have been forced to continue to study where the political Islamist indoctrination of the Erdogan regime prevails. Therefore, it can be asserted that even this part of the genocide crime has also been committed at a certain level. Dear friends, the book's findings reveal that the process of genocide conducted by Erdogan regime targeting Gülen movement has completed the stages of classification, symbolization, discrimination, dehumanization, organization, polarization, preparation, persecution, as detailed by Stanton. It has also been observed that the stage of extermination has already begun on an individual level. The stage of denial has also started, as in the case of people who were killed under torture because of their Gülen movement affiliation. All 5 conditions that Kakar stated a country should have in the process of a possible genocide are present in today's Turkey. Moreover, at least 2 of the 5 acts described in Article 2 of the UN Genocide Convention as the crime of genocide have been realized completely, and 3 of them have been realized to various extents. If we elaborate on the Erdogan regime's systematic, widespread, and deliberate persecution of members of the Gülen movement, we can easily assert that it constitutes the crime of killing members of the group, as is mentioned in Article 2 of the Convention, partially. The crime of causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group completely. The crime of deliberately inflicting on the group's conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part completely. The crime of imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group partially. And the crime of forcibly transferring children of the group to another group, again, partially. Dear friends, it is important to remember again that Article 2 of the Convention, Genocide Convention, I mean, begins with the words, in the present convention, in quote, in the present convention, genocide means any of the following acts committed with intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group, end quote. And the fact that just one of these acts is legally sufficient to define the crime as genocide. Although the act of extermination of the Gülen movement or their uprooting, in the words of Erdogan, meet the academic and legal definition and description of genocide in many ways, the most destructive dimension of genocide is the physical extermination, and it has not been implemented systematically. However, as mentioned earlier, the realization of extermination is just a matter of time. Academics Elihu Richter, Rayal Stein, Alex Bernier, and Mark Sherman pointed out in one of their articles that, in quote, the lessons of the Holocaust empower us to address prevention of hate language and incitement when they are used against all populations without waiting for the consequences, end quote. Therefore, genocide experts like Stanton have underlined that genocide should be preventable if they are predictable. And also, he mentions the impossibility of preventing genocide after the start of killing, rape, deportations, and looting. These scholars conclude from the evidence of several 20th century genocides that, in quote, hate speech and incitement together increase risk for genocide, especially when they come from the top down in authoritarian regimes with their environments of coercion, direction, and instruction, end quote. While acknowledging that not all incitement leads to genocide and that genocide may occur without evidence of incitement, they advise that when political leaders use explicit pseudo-medical and epidemiological metaphors such as microbes, field, cancer, typhoid, and rats to dehumanize victim groups, it is prudent to regard such language as an urgent warning sign of imminent genocide. In the case of Erdogan regime and the Gulen movement, unfortunately, this stage has long passed. Erdogan, by targeting the Gulen movement, has for quite some time been using hundreds of hate expressions, including viruses, cancers, tumors, vampires, leeches, bloodsuckers, bacteria, and microbes. However, since the systematic and widespread physical extermination process through killings has not begun, it is not yet too late. Dear friends, as a conclusion, I can say that a possible genocide openly targeting members of the Gülen movement is not only predictable, it can also easily be seen with its concrete signs, and that should be preventable. In order to prevent this genocide, with the stage of execution just inches away, it is vital that all international humanitarian institutions and political organizations act without delay, develop measures, and implement them immediately to prevent a possible full-fledged genocide. Thank you very much for listening to me, and thank you very much for your patience.
Dr. Keneş, thank you so much. First for for your book, which is so detailed and reasoned and lays out a very, very compelling argument that we need to be paying a great deal of attention to the people of the Gulen movement, otherwise known as the Hizmet movement.
Yes.
But before we get into the more troubling aspects, what are the major contributions of the Hizmet movement in the different regions of the world?
Yes, thank you very much, Kelly, for this question. To me, as a global civic society movement or civil society movement, Hizmet movement's major contributions to humanity on both national, regional, and global levels are basically its efforts to promote universal humanistic values, its efforts to educate both its own sympathizers and its interlocutors with an understanding of mutual tolerance and respect to all diversities. And of course, it's enormous efforts to bring people from different ethnic, religious, cultural, and ideological backgrounds to make the ideal of peaceful coexistence a reality. I think this peace building and even I can say that peacekeeping efforts are so important as we take the idea of clash of civilizations argued by late American scholar Samuel Huntington into consideration. And today, the value of these contributions to assure a sustainable peace and coexistence based on diversity are much more important in a time of rising authoritarian populist tendencies, racism, xenophobia, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, Christianophobia, homophobia, etc. I think like that.
Yes, indeed. So, and which leads directly to the next question. Here you have an organization, the Gulen Movement, Hizmet, which is really about peace building, bridge building. It's a civic organization. It is about bringing people together. So why is this group such a target of denigration and persecution by Turkey's ruling elite?
Thank you for this question. Also, I think it is a bit complicated, but to keep it simple, I can say that Turkey has never had a political system based on a real rule of law, a real supremacy of law, and an authentic pluralist society or a full-fledged democracy. And the Turkish state has always been an apparatchik or apparatus at the hands of some oligarchic groups. And these groups have never tended to share this power with others or otherized segments of the society. For almost a decade, this apparatus has been dominated by Islamo-fascist ideology led by Erdogan. As a faith-based civic movement, Hizmet movement or Gülen movement had a crucial influence both on religious conservative people and liberal groups in Turkey. Problem is that when Erdogan decided to return to his factory settings, namely his political Islamism of his past, and to use his accumulated power to make Turkey a kind of Islamist regime just after he won 50% of vote in 2011 elections, he realized or already knew that Gülen movement is not sharing his national and international goals determined in the framework of his Islamist agenda. Whereas Erdogan had seen a great opportunity for him after 2011 elections to make Turkey a Sharia regime, a kind of Sharia regime. Exactly at the same time, he also perceived Arab Revolution as a great opportunity to expand his power to a greater geography and export his ideology to other Muslim nations or people. Erdogan didn't only want to create a one-man rule in Turkey, but also to be an ecumenical leader for all Muslims around the world. However, as much as I understand, his Met movement has always been sincere on its pro-democratic stance, pro-Western preferences, and pluralistic character, and it didn't give any positive signal for helping Erdogan to realize his ambitious Islamist agenda or goals. So Erdogan thought his Met movement, with all its presence in bureaucracy, media, civil society, and business, and etc., would be an obstacle before his goals. And he decided to abolish these obstacles before him. I think if his Met movement could continue to keep its social power and influence over the society thanks to its media or media outlets and civil organizations, Erdogan could not establish the current despotic regime. Or vice versa, if his Met movement gives support to Erdogan's Islamist agenda, I think it will not be a target for Erdogan regime right now.
Thank you. My goodness. So tell me, what is the role of pro-Kemalist and other political parties in the coup attempt and the unlawful practices in the last 5 years?
You know, Islamo-fascist Erdogan regime is today an authoritarian regime, but it has also some totalitarian characteristics. And the regime owes these totalitarian characteristics to the so-called opposition parties in Turkey, including Kemalist, secularist Republican People Party, namely CHP. Either because of their fear or their sincere preferences, the political parties have always tended to collaborate with the Erdogan regime, not only just for exterminating his Met movement, but also persecuting Kurdish people in eastern part of Turkey. Of course, nobody can claim, and I can't claim, that Republican People Party has positive feelings about the Erdogan regime. But nobody claim either that they have not facilitated Erdogan regime's persecution of the Hizmet movement and the Kurds. I think especially CHP and its allies in the state mechanism have acted opportunistically and assumed that after finishing Hizmet movement, it would be easy to topple down Erdogan or Erdogan regime. After a while, however, they lost their capacity to do that. Therefore, it is a great shame for all segments of the society in Turkey and politics which still use the Erdogan's hate rhetoric against Hizmet movement and thus justify genocidal crimes committed by the Erdogan regime. So they are also responsible.
Yes. So if I understand you correctly, first of all, Erdogan's regime is totalitarian, it's authoritarian, a peaceful organization about building civic society and the democratic process is a direct threat to that, to his power. And he has some allies that are allied with him. Many of them simply out of fear of being that he will turn his attention to them. So here's a question. What is the reason for the different responses from in Europe and the US in reaction to the genocide against the Gulen movement, say compared to the 1915 genocide against Armenians? The United States, I know, has been very quiet about all of this. Do our political, military, and economic interests in Turkey have anything to do with this?
Of course. Turkey is a big country and a big nation with its 83 million population located on a very strategic position in between Middle East, Asia, and Europe. So Erdogan has great opportunities to satisfy the needs of real politics, followed by the other states, including EU member countries and the US. Thanks to these congestions and opportunities which were successfully exploited by Erdogan, European Union and the US have just followed a policy of appeasement. Especially refugee crisis stem from Syria, gave a great power to Erdogan to exploit and intimidate European countries. It will not be an exaggeration if I said the European countries and even the US both before Erdogan or Erdogan regime. They are repeating exactly the same mistake that European powers did as they tolerated and appeased Adolf Hitler just before he led to a terrible catastrophe for all humankind. Nevertheless, I have also to note that until recent times, these same countries didn't hesitate to open their doors for those who escaped from Erdogan's persecution. But in regard of the essence of the problem, especially appeasement policies followed by EU countries vis-a-vis Erdogan regime are not excusable, I think. It is not excusable. And I think it will create a much bigger problems for European Union and the US in the near future. And all signs and signals of these problems emerged, actually.
Yes. So it's just perhaps politically expedient to say, oh, the coup was these people, assigning. That was very. It was dangerously masterful of Erdogan to pin the coup attempt on the Gulen people, and so it's politically expedient for the United States government to not get involved in it. But here's a how about the press, however, journalism's. So there is Erdogan's regime is doing all these illegal activities, kidnapping, blackmailing opponents, sending threats, beating people up, bribing foreign government officials. These are the sorts of things that I think of the free press as wanting to report. So why don't news outlets such as CNN and the BBC, the New York Times, the Washington Post, why aren't they covering stories about this, of people like Orhan Inandi, the way that, say, they covered the Khashoggi incident?
Yeah, thank you for this question. Of course, one can claim presence of double standard and hypocrisy in media and political spheres, in all over the world. I have realized during this terrible process of persecution, targeting his members, that not only media and governments, but also well-famed international human rights organizations act so selectively and applying double standards. Their selective sensitivities have never prioritized the sufferings of the groups like Hizmet Movement. Together with some of my exiled colleagues, we realized this painful reality especially when we were covering or researching the victimization of persecuted journalists in Turkey. Beside of governments and international media, international press bodies, I would not mention their names, and human rights organizations have always tended to ignore the persecuted journalists who are from the media organizations close to Hizmet movement and the Kurdish political movement also. They have always prioritized the persecuted journalists who are known with their Kemalist or leftist orientation. Anyway, I thank them for giving support to these persecuted colleagues, but I couldn't understand why they are not giving the same support to the other journalists. I think the same situation is valid for Orhan İnandı case. However, there are still crucial differences between the İnandı and Kaşıkçı cases. Kaşıkçı, who was a well-known Saudi journalist who has had an international reputation, was kidnapped, tortured in Saudi consulate building in Istanbul, killed, and dismembered. İnandı, who was a friend of mine, was not a well-known Turkish citizen, unfortunately, was also kidnapped. He was also kidnapped, tortured in Turkish embassy building in Bishkek, and transferred to Turkey illegally. However, and thankfully, he's still alive. So this is the different cases. So I think, yes, there are some resemblance, likelihoods between the two cases, but also there are still some differences. And this doesn't shade the reality that international organizations and media is still applying a double standards and adopt an hypocritical stance.
So journalists really do rely on those human rights organizations for information, and that's my hope is that book discussions like this and your own publication will help to shift the sentiment and understanding. Yeah. So how about the international courts? After all these crimes that Erdogan has committed, why haven't there been any cases against him in the international courts, such as the Sudanese leader Bashir and the Serbian leader Milosevic?
Yeah, unfortunately, again, international community and international legal organization have not a tendency of doing preventive or preemptive acts, despite a great volume of genocide literature suggests the opposite. Please remember what Gregory Stanton said. He said a genocide is predictable, so it is preventable. However, we see that international community and organizations don't care about predictions and doing nothing to prevent what has been predicted. We saw this reality even in Bosnia, Herzegovina, Rwanda, Sudan, and today in Yemen, etc. Ömer Bashir and Slobodan Milosevic cases are not an exception either. These cases against them were also opened many years after these people committed heinous genocide crimes. Actually, because of this reality, any effort to create, as you just remind, effort to create awareness and agenda on ongoing crimes and to warn people and international organizations to take preventive measures is so precious. Even if these efforts do not give positive results most of the time, to create an expected and timely mobilization on the side of international organizations. We should do much better and much more to create this awareness and this mobilization, I think.
Yeah. So basically, the international courts move very slow, and they don't think about genocide as preventable. They wait until too many tragedies already happen. Yeah. So here another question is that in your book, the ongoing move towards genocide is really, you primarily blame Erdogan. But what about the other government officials that are working with him? There are some people feel like you need to also call out the people that work with him and call them out as well.
Yes, of course. Actually, I blame the despotic regime founded and led by Erdogan, not Erdogan himself alone. Of course, no regime is formed and consists of just one person. Yes, Erdogan is the first person to be accused and blamed, but he is not alone. With all its denominators, including most of opposition parties and groups, even they are responsible for these heinous crimes. As, for instance, as former the foreign affairs minister and the prime minister, Mr. Ahmet Davutoğlu, and other similar political figures are also the culprits of this genocide process. So it is so natural to blame them all together, not just Erdogan. Yes, Erdogan is the first person to be accused, but he is not alone in this unhumanistic crime that he commits.
Thank you. Yes, he is not. He has found people who are capable of carrying out his orders. So, how do you foresee the way towards justice? How do you foresee Turkey to returning to normality and a period of restoring human rights in the country?
Frankly and sadly, I am so pessimistic on this issue. I have nothing to be optimistic. There is no easy way to solve this huge problem. Despite some weaknesses of the regime have emerged in recent months, I think the regime is still under the process of consolidation. And these weaknesses are not the signs of or for collapse of the regime. And I believe that Erdogan and his allies will never tend to leave the power. The reason is simple. He has no such a luxury after committing host of national and international crimes, including crimes against humanity and genocide-level massacres, both in the country and abroad. It is a sad but unfortunately not unrealistic to assume that there is no peaceful or democratic option to rescue Turkey from Erdogan despotism. Without rescuing the country from Erdogan, there will be no ground for reinstalling rule of law, turn back to normalcy and democracy, to create a feasible and plural ground for promoting liberties and human rights in the country. Sorry for this educated pessimism.
Well, we understand. We can hope, but it does not look very probable at this moment. It looks like things will get worse before they get better.
Unfortunately.
Yes, unfortunately. So what are some situations that people like policemen, soldiers, judges, prosecutors, who are currently directly or indirectly involved in carrying out genocide activities, what are the situations that they could face in an international setting in the future?
Yes, as I answered your previous questions, this also related, I think. The related articles, I think, and clauses of both UN Genocide Convention And actually, Turkish penal code show that those who are involved in any crime against humanity, crime of torture, and genocide are legally responsible for these crimes. So I think all prosecutors, judges, police officials, and military officers are culprits of these crimes, and they deserve to be tried both in national and international courts. The problem is that since these people know severity of their crimes they have committed and what they deserve, they will do whatever necessary to keep their power. And this is actually basic reason of a vicious circle haunts Turkey. These people have created a despair situation, both for themselves and the people of Turkey. In order to escape their unavoidable destiny, they have to give support to despotic regime and its illegal acts and persecutions as long as they can do. And I don't know when they will be tried and pay the price for their ill doings.
Yes. So these people that are in positions of power, they are in a place where if they are to speak out against the regime and refuse to carry out genocidal activities, they will surely be persecuted. But if they continue to work for Erdogan and commit these atrocities in the name of their position, they will surely face the international courts eventually. So
I hope so.
So in pages 58 to 62 of your book, you discuss the terrorist groups that Erdogan has worked with, such as Hezbollah, Sadat, Adomun, Harz. So can you tell us a little bit more about the roles of the Turkish presidency of religious affairs or other religious groups and theologians as part of the genocide?
Thank you very much for this question. I think without the support of theologians over 100,000 imams and the religious officials employed by Turkish Directorate of Religious Affairs, Erdogan could not establish and consolidate his Islamofascist regime. By exploiting any exploitable Islamic values and Islamic jurisdictions, they justified all ill doings, delinquencies, and transgressions of Erdogan and his regime. Since 60, 70, or maybe 80% of Turkish people still take religious tenet as their references, the purposely politicized interpretation of Islamic principles to meet the needs of political Islamism give Erdogan a great opportunity to convince religious and conservative masses to tolerate and even support persecution of millions of innocent people. I think imams and theologians and religious leaders should be counted among the culprits of a possible genocide crime. On the other hand, it is not a secret that Erdogan has used terror organizations, mafia organizations, and jihadist groups to terrorize and intimidate the opposition people, as exactly late scholar Hasan Kakar, this is an Afghan-American scholar, mentioned among his preconditions of a genocide in a country. Everybody knows that Erdogan used some illegal organizations. Everybody knows that, and he has no effort to conceal these collaborations and his alliance with Al-Qaeda kind of organizations, extensions in Turkey, the residuals of Hezbollah terror organizations, even the ISIL's presence in the country. And everybody knows that he is collaborated with IBDAJ as a very radical terror organization, and some other similar jihadist, radical Islamist organization in the country.
So, so not all of the religious leaders in Turkey are publicly supporting Erdogan's genocidal activities. That is, but he is using those ultra conservative ones.
Frankly, Kelly, I don't know how could you get that information. Almost all of the religious groups and religious segments of society give support for Erdogan's genocide.
So they are right.
Process.
So they're
so
supporting him.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's very, very troubling. So it is not. Is it out of fear of reprisals?
I think there is a list of reasons, a long list of reasons to give support for Erdogan to abolish or exterminate Gülen Movement's people, because there is a kind of envy among these people, and they want to take place of Erdogan, Gülen Movement's people in the public arena and the bureaucracy in media. So I think it's a kind of interest or taking a share from the power, from the cultural power, social power, and political power, you know.
Because following, so a religious organization would just, it is a way for them to share the power and share a nationalist pride and share, okay, well that, I can, I mean, I don't condone it certainly, but I can see that, how that can happen. So here's another question. So all of the genocides in the history of Turkey have been supported by ultranationalists, the Committee of Union and Progress, and later by the Kemalists. So why are the Kemalists, who look to Europe and the US, and Christians, they see them as enemies, and they again have no tolerance for the Armenian and Greek minority rights? Again, they are sort of casting the West as the enemy. Why does the West then not reciprocate? Why does, for example, why did Biden visit Can Dündar's son when he was arrested, but didn't do the same for Hidayet Karaka, who was arrested on the same date?
Yeah, it is again, it's a bit complicated to answer, but I can say that the current Kemalists are ideologically and maybe even genetically the offsprings of the Committee of Union and Progress of the Ottoman era. There is a line of continuity among these groups who think that Turkey is the last independent piece of land to take shelter and, of course, dominate over it. When one looks at their appearance and apparels, it seems these people are the most westernized people in Turkey. But in reality, and in essence, they are deeply anti-Western. Most of these people have ancestors who originally lived in Balkans and other parts of European soils and had to migrate to Anatolia to escape massacres or persecutions before, during, and after First World War. Therefore, their anti-Westernism is based on an unhealed trauma caused by the fear of losing the last country they have. This trauma is named as Serb syndrome. Serb syndrome. They think that Western countries try to divide the country thanks to Christian minority groups and occupy Turkey through Serb treaty signed by allied European powers. And these powers will do the same if they find a new opportunity. Despite their deep emotional and political anti-Westernism, since they have adopted a Western lifestyle, and they could easily find sympathy in Western countries, as the Hizmet people, who are perceived as more religious, could not find that. It is not easy for the people in the West to realize that most of those in westernized appearance are, and of course apparels, I mean clothes, garments, are indeed anti-Western. And some of those who seem more religious, actually digested Western values or universal humanistic values much better than they are, and they are not anti-Western. I can't say for all religious people, but some segments of the religious segments of people are, believe me, much more digested democratic values, universal humanistic values than them. As you see and understand that image and perception is much stronger than the realities. Thus, it is not so strange to see that people and the leaders in the West tend to show strong solidarity with people like Can Dündar. And actually, I am very happy for that. And sadly, they ignore to show a bit of sympathy for people like journalist Hidayet Karaca. This is, I think, one of the biggest mistakes done by the people in the Western world. But Erdoganist political Islamists' image also contribute for this generalization. They are also given image of being religious, personal people, and act so terribly. So the people in the Western world, in Europe, United States, North America, think that all the religious people are the same. And since they perceive the members of the Gülen movement also as religious or faith-based, they approach them as they perceived Erdoganists, you know. So it is so unlucky.
It is complex, extremely complex, and Erdogan is, shall I say, quite diabolical and very smart in how he plays with appearances to gain access.
He's a real political animal.
Yeah.
To maximize his interest in any situation.
Right. So how about the victims of the genocide in the making in Turkey? What about these victims who are either in Turkey or living abroad in the wider international community? How can they put an end to this ongoing atrocities?
Yes, right now, thousands of people, innocent people, had to leave their countries, their lives, and they give back all their memories and all their belongings, and they try to start a new life around the world, from Australia to Europe, and from maybe the Kazakhstan to America and Canada. But there are a lot to do, give an end to this process. It is not easy, but there are a lot to do. Since the Hizmet movement is a civic movement, there is no other solution, I think, for them other than to raise their voice on the behalf of the victims and create a stronger awareness in the world about oppressed people who left behind in Turkey and what is actually going on in Turkey. In this regard, civic activism is so crucial. Much more effective awareness can be created by writing, speaking, demonstrating, and other types of activisms. Activities such as organizing sport, music, and film events can also be effective and beneficial. In this regard, I really appreciate the efforts of NBA star Enes Kanter. I wish and I hope one day other NBA stars, movie stars, pop stars, or other stars or prominent personalities in other sectors also raise their voices against oppressions, human rights violations committed around the world, including Turkey.
Yeah, to lift your voice, to write books such as yours, but also from
to do.
Yes, to bring attention to his and the role of those people who are in the public sphere, such as artists and actors and actresses, to be able to draw attention to. I have one more question. So, in the July 15th coup, who supported that? In both domestically and abroad? Were there any other countries, such as England or Russia, Iran, were they involved in that coup, directly or indirectly?
Frankly, I couldn't say exactly how, but yes, before and during the July 15th trap, I say trap, or false flag coup attempt, Russian and the Russian political establishment and its intelligence apparatus gave huge support to Erdogan's evil plans. And also pro-Iranian pundits claim that Iran, through militias under the control of Qasem Soleimani, he was killed by United States attacked in 1 year or 1.5 years ago. The militias under the control of Qasem Soleimani played a significant role to make coup scenario to be a real gift of God for Erdogan. There are also numbers of speculations that Syrian and international jihadists also played crucial role in July 15. And it is widely claimed that these jihadists are responsible for the killings of most of the civilians, police officials, and soldiers at that night. Since Erdogan regime legislated a law to assure immunity and impunity for these culprits, nobody could investigate and indict these people. And since over 95% of Turkish media under direct control of Erdogan and enormous pressure over journalists, it is not so easy and maybe it is not possible for journalists to investigate the validity of these speculations and claims either. But sincerely, most interesting among these has been how the UK has been to learn how the UK, United Kingdom, or Britain, or British government give great support to Erdogan and Erdogan regime during his efforts and their efforts to establish this Islamofascist regime. It is no secret, especially after this Brexit, British government gave any kinds of support for Erdogan regime. They collaborate in many different sectors, in diplomacy, in regional politics, in economic relations, and it is ununderstandable for me why the British government is so close and why they give big support to Erdogan regime.
I didn't mention Trump administration because as an American, you know, I already know that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Again, I feel like we've made an important first step in telling this story, raising people's awareness, and with the hope that genocide can be prevented. I think of a wise teacher I had in high school that said, no, everybody thinks that a prophet is just conjuring up strange things and miraculously somehow knows the future. But no, a prophet is someone who can see things that other people don't, the things that are right in front of them, and are speaking truth to those. And indeed, I say, Mr. Kenesh, you are a prophet.
Thank you.
Yeah. And
in that sense, maybe
yes.
I made some predictions and analyzing the processes,
but
think, not prophet.
Yes, well, I think your voice is prophetic. I think it is, and it is like many prophets. It is a great dire warning that there is a lot of people, a lot of innocent people will be harmed for working for simple things like peace and understanding and justice. So I am going to pass the microphone as it is over to Elif Gordu for closing words.
Thank you very much.
And thank you, Kelly and Dr. Kenesh, and thank you to all of our viewers for being here today and joining our discussion as we unveil the increasing systematic hate toward Gülen Movement members in Turkey. On behalf of the City of Bridges Foundation, it was a pleasure to host such an eye-opening discussion. We wish you peace and a wonderful day. Thank you.
Have a nice day.